The Legend of Jimmy Spoon by Kristina Gregory, 17, War in the East. Winter was bitterly cold. Three go-suit hunters were found near Ruby Lake, frozen to death and starved, apparently on their way to ask for food. During the same blizzard, Penn Haley's horse fell in a hole and broke its neck. In waist-deep snow, Penn walked the mochila 3 miles to the next station. He arrived nearly frozen himself. Several boys quit because they decided they weren't being paid enough. Some quit because they'd hurt themselves, and others quit to help finish the transcontinental telegraph. Poles were being planted west of the Missouri River at such a rate that soon wires would reach coast to coast. In winter, loneliness was sharper. Wind howled across the desert, blowing snow over the trail and into tall drifts against the cabin. Visitors were few. Friends were separated for a few days at a time while they rode in opposite directions. Sometimes a relief boy would be in bed with fever. This meant the tired rider must carry the mochila another 50 or even 100 miles, stopping only to change horses and drink a bit of water. Riders leaving St. Joseph often shouted news items to every station they passed, like paper boys on street corners. They cried the headlines all the way to Sacramento. President Buchanan's farewell address to Congress. Texas leaves the Union. Kansas gets its statehood. Congress makes a territory for Colorado, Nevada, Dakota. Then spring came, and with it, the event that sparked the quickest run ever. 7 days, 17 hours. Every boy and horse was pushed to go as fast as possible. So fast that 2 Mustangs were galloped to death. Riders raced in pairs for safety, shouting together the words from Washington City. Lincoln's inaugural address! Less than 2 weeks after Abraham Lincoln was sworn in as the 16th President of the United States, his speech was printed in the San Francisco newspapers. No longer would Americans joke that news had already been forgotten in the East by the time folks in the West heard it. 1 month later, when Jimmy learned that Confederates had fired on Fort Sumter in South Carolina, he had a bad feeling. He knew it meant civil war. No one in the dusty way stations could foresee that this fighting between northern and southern states would last for 4 long, terrible years. No one realized that hundreds of thousands would die. After Jimmy shouted this story on a night run all the way to Roberts Creek Station, he returned to Ruby Valley the next morning in time for breakfast. Smoke wisping from the chimney brought the good smell of bacon frying and griddle cakes. He was famished. He couldn't wait to eat and to talk politics with Milo or whoever else was at the table. But when he entered the cabin, his heart sank. His friends, Will and Nick Cohn, were rolling up their gear. Their boots were clean. They wore bright red bandanas with shirts that Mr. Tagg had washed and mended for them. Their young faces were eager. "Jim!" they cried, happy to see him. But Jimmy didn't smile. He looked at Milo, then back at his friends. "What are you fellas doing? Why are you packing?" "We're going to war," Nick announced. "Jimmy, we're going to be soldiers, real soldiers. The Confederates need us." Jimmy's shoulders dropped. "Why do you want to go to war? Why?" He squeezed his hands into fists, trying to think of words to discourage them. The memory of Washaki's war with the Crow was still a horrible scar inside him. Men died in wars. They were mutilated or crippled or blinded. Mothers would lose sons, and brothers, they would lose husbands. How could Jimmy explain? "We'll be heroes, Jim." "Heroes?" Jimmy said almost with a laugh. "You already are heroes. Why do you want to be heroes twice? You're riders for the Pony Express like me and Penn, remember? We joined up together. We promised we'd stay together." He gestured to Milo as if to say, "Can't you stop them?" But Milo and Mr. Tagg remained silent. Their eyes were sad. A clatter from the approaching stage interrupted Jimmy. Before he could protest, the 2 excited brothers hurried out into the brisk April morning, while a fresh team was harnessed to the coach. Nick and Will tossed their bundles into the rear boot. They tried to console Jimmy. "We'll be back to Salt Lake before you know it," said Will. "We got kin in Georgia, so we'll be all right. Don't frown so, Jim. It'll go fast." Soon Jimmy took Will's hand, then Nick's. He wanted to embrace them both, but hesitated when he noticed passengers watching. Among them were 3 young riders, spiffed and smiling like boys headed for war. Sam Melvin, Johnny Fry, and another boy he didn't know had quit the pony and were going east to join the army. Jimmy wondered if they were breaking their contracts. The dusty red coach pulled out, arms waving out each side, made it look like a strange creature scurrying away. Clouds of powdery white alkali rose from the trail as it sped on. Jimmy's heart was heavy. He would miss his friends, and he would worry about them. He wandered beyond the coral, out into the sandy brush. After many minutes, Mr. Tagg came looking for him, wiping his calloused hands on his apron. "Come on now, son," he said gently. "I know how you feel. I wish they weren't going myself. Milo and I each lost a brother at the Alamo in '36. That battle was terrible for so many families. All we can do, Jim, is ask the Lord to watch over Nick and Willie. That's all we can do." And that is the end of chapter 17.